This presentation covers 3 sections of the Corporation Code of the Philippines. Title 15, Foreign Corporations, governs the operation of foreign companies in the country. Title 16, Investigations, Offenses, and Penalties, outlines violations and their corresponding consequences. Title 16, Miscellaneous Provisions, contains additional rules to ensure proper implementation of the code.
Section 140 defines what a foreign corporation is. It's a company created under laws outside the Philippines. To do business, the foreign company must first get license from the SEC and a certificate of authority from the proper government agency. It can only operate if its home country also allows Filipino businesses to do the same. For example, a Japanese electronics company wants to open a branch in Manila, and Japan allows Filipino firms to operate there. Then it can be legally apply for license and do business in our country. Section 141 explained that foreign corporations already licensed before this code remain authorized to operate. However, they must comply with the current provision of the code and other special laws. For instance, an American insurance company licensed years ago can still operate today, but it must follow all updated Philippine corporate and SEC regulations. Section 142 details the requirements for a foreign company to secure a license from SEC. It must have been certified with copies of its incorporation papers, name of a Philippine resident agent, state its business purpose, and show proof of good financial condition, and that its home country also allows Filipino companies to operate there. For example, a Korean skincare company wanting to open a stores in the Philippines must provide all these documents before it can legally begin operations. Section 143 explains the issuance of license. Once the SEC verifies that all requirements are complete, it grants the license to operate. The foreign corporation must then deposit 500,000 pesos worth of approved securities within 60 days as protection for local creditors. For example, if a Singapore-based IT company earns 20 million pesos in a year, it must add 2% or 200,000 pesos to its deposits to ensure financial security and fairness to those dealing with company in the Philippines. States that every foreign corporation must appoint a resident agent in the Philippines. This can be individual or domestic corporation. The agent must be financially stable and of good moral character. For example, a U.S. clothing brand expanding here may designate a Filipino lawyer as its resident agent to receive official documents and represent locally. Section 145 ensures that every foreign corporation has a representative in the Philippines for legal purposes. It must file a power of attorney naming its resident agent to receive summon or legal notices. If the company no longer has an agent, the SEC becomes the substitute recipient. For example, if a French firm resident agent leaves the position, any legal papers served to SEC will still be considered valid services of the company. Section 46 makes it clear that once a foreign corporation is licensed to operate here, it must follow all the Philippines law that apply local corporations. The only exceptions are laws about how corporations are created or dissolved and internal relations among their members. For instance, a Canadian construction company must still obey the Philippine tax, labor, and environmental laws while operating here.
Section 147, amended to the Articles of Bylaw. Let's begin with the Section 147, which talk about amended to the Articles of Incorporation or the bylaws of foreign corporation. This section requires a foreign corporation to file in a duly authenticated copy of any amended with the Security and Exchange Commission within 60 days after it becomes effective. The goal is to ensure that any changes in their structure or operations remain transparent and legally recognized in the Philippines. Let's begin for the example. A foreign company changes in corporate address or adds a new clause in its bylaw. It must report and file these changes with the Security Exchange Commission or the SEC. Section 148, Amended License. Section 148 covers the amended license. This applies when a foreign corporation changes its corporate name or wants to engage in a new business activities in the Philippines. In such cases, it must apply for amended license with the Security Exchange Commission or for short with the SEC. with the proper endorsements from the related government agency. For example, if a foreign company named a Global Foods Ltd change its name to the Global Nutrition Corporation, it must be updated the license with the Security Exchange Commission before 20, Section 149, Merger or Consolidation. Section 149 talks about merger or consolidation involving a foreign corporation. This means that a foreign company may merge or combine with a Philippine company if it follows both Philippine law and the law of its home country. For example, if a US-based tech company merge with a local software firm, the merger will be only be valid once both set of laws are satisfied. This ensures fair and lawful integration between the foreign and domestic corporations.
Section 150. Doing business without a license. This section states that a foreign corporation operating in the Philippines without securing a license from the Security Exchange and Commission, or SEC, is not allowed to maintain or take part in any court case or administrative proceeding in the country. In simpler terms, if a foreign company does business here without permission, it cannot sue anyone in the Philippines. However, it's important to note that such a corporation can still be sued or held accountable for any valid causes of actions under our laws. For example, let's say ABC company from Japan regularly sells products in the Philippines without getting an SEC license. If a Filipino buyer fails to pay ABC company, cannot file a case in court because it's not authorized to do business here. But if ABC company violates a contract or causes damage, the Filipino buyer can sue the company in the Philippines. This provision protects our local legal system by ensuring that only licensed and law-abiding foreign companies can use the Philippines court while still make sure that they are accountable for any wrongdoing. Section 151. Revocation of license. This section gives the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, the authority to revoke or suspend a foreign corporation's license to do business in the Philippines. This happens when a company fails to follow legal requirements or act improperly while operating here. These are several grounds for revoctions. This includes failure to file annual reports or pay the required fees, failure to appoint or maintain a resident agent in the Philippines, failure to notify the SEC of any changes in its agent or office address, failure to submit amendments to its articles of incorporations or bylaws, submitting false information or any report or document, not paying tax or penalties owed to the government, doing business beyond what its license allows, acting as an agent for another unlicensed foreign companies, and any other act that makes the corporation unfit to do business in the country. Section 152. Issuance of Certificate of Revocation. Once the SEC decides to revoke a company's license, it will issue an official certificate of revocation. The certificate serves as a proof that the foreign corporation can no longer legally do business in the Philippines. The process is very straightforward. First, the SEC issues the certificate of revocation after confirming the cancellation of the license. Then a copy of the certificate is sent to the appropriate government agencies that need to be informed. Finally, the SEC mails a notice and a copy of the certificate to the corporation's registered office in the Philippines. This formally marks the end of that corporation's legal authority to operate in our country. For example, let's say ABC Company, a business from Singapore, failed to file its required reports. Because of this, the SEC revoked its license and issued a certificate of revocation. Copies were sent to other government agencies, and ABC Company received the notice at its Philippines office, officially ending its right to do business here. In short, Section 152 ensures proper documentation and notification whenever a foreign company's license is revoked, making the process official, transparent, and final. Section 153. Withdrawal of foreign corporations. This section explains the process when a foreign corporation decides to stop doing business in the Philippines. To officially withdraw, the company must file a petition for withdrawal of license with the Securities and Exchange Commission or SEC and comply with certain requirements. Here are the main requirements for withdrawal. First, all claims or obligations in the Philippines must be paid, settled, or compromised. Second, all taxes, fees, and penalties owed to the government must be fully paid. And third, the petition for withdrawal must be published once a week for 3 consecutive weeks in a newspaper of general circulation. Only after completing all these steps will the SEC issue a certificate of withdrawal, officially confirming that the corporation has ceased operations in the country. For example, ABC Company, a company from South Korea, decides to close its Philippine branch. It pays all its local debt and taxes and then publish its withdrawal notice for 3 weeks in a newspaper. After meeting all the requirements, the SEC issues a certificate of withdrawal, officially ending ABC Company's business operations in the Philippines. In short, Section 163 ensures that before a corporation, Section 154, investigation and prosecution of offenses. Under this section, the Securities and Exchange Commission, or SEC, has the authority to investigate any suspected violations of the corporation's code or any of its rules, regulations, or orders. After conducting an investigation, the SEC may publish its findings or issue advisories that are relevant to the public or to the concerned parties. However, this publication must strictly follow the Data Privacy Act of 2012 and other related laws to protect confidential and personal information. In addition, before making any statement in the public that involves companies regulated by other government agencies, the SEC must coordinate with those agencies to ensure proper handling and accuracy of information. To give an example, the SEC investigates ABC Corporation for submitting false financial reports. After confirming the violation, the SEC publishes an advisory to warn the public about the issue. Before releasing the report, the SEC coordinates with the Bureau of Internal Revenue or BIR to ensure proper regulations and compliance with data privacy laws. In summary, Section 154 gives the SEC the power to investigate corporation violation and to inform the public responsibly, while maintaining transparency, coordination, and respect for data privacy.
Section 155, Administration of Oaths, Subpoena of Witnesses and Documents. In this section, the SEC is empowered to formally administer oaths or affirmations to person it is investigating and may perform other acts that are needed to carry out such proceedings or investigations. So, Section 155 gives the SEC investigatory and quasi-judicial powers analogous to a tribunal or regulatory investigator.
Section 156. Section 156 gives the Securities and Exchange Commission, also known as SEC, the power to hold a person in contempt, similar to the power of a regional trial court or RTC, if that person disobeys an SEC order or subpoena, or refuses to testify when required, refuses to produce documents when demanded in an investigation, otherwise obstructs SEC proceedings. There are 2 types of contempt. Direct contempt, the first one, misbehavior committed in the presence of the SEC or against its authority. For example, being disrespectful during a hearing, refusing to answer questions in the hearing room. The second one is indirect contempt, disobedience not in the presence of the SEC. For example, ignoring a subpoena, refusing to submit required corporate documents. And the SEC may impose penalties such as fines, imprisonment, similar to the RTC standards, and other sanctions allowed under law. Section 157. Section 157 gives the Securities and Exchange Commission, also known as SEC, the power to ask the Regional Trial Court or RTC to issue a warrant of arrest against a witness who refuses to obey a subpoena, fails to appear before the SEC without a valid reason, refuses to testify to or give evidence during an SEC investigation or hearing, This means if someone ignores the SEC, lawful summons, or obstructs a corporate investigation, the SEC may seek their arrest through the courts. This ensures that witnesses cannot simply refuse to cooperate or incorporate fraud or compliances. Investigation. Section 158. Section 158 authorizes the Securities and Exchange Commission, also known as SEC, to impose administrative penalties when a corporation, its directors or officers or other responsible personnel violates the revised corporation code or SEC rules and regulations issued under the code, the SEC orders, and directives. The SEC may impose fines, suspension, or renovation of a corporate certificate of incorporation, dissolution of the corporation, disqualification of directors, trustee, or officers, and other penalties allowed under the law. This means if a corporation breaks corporate law or refuses to follow SEC rules, the SEC can fine, suspend, or even shut it down and penalize its officers. Section 159. Section 159. Section 159 penalizes the unauthorized use of a corporate name with a fine ranging from 10,000 to 200,000. This penalizes corporations that use a name that is not clearly distinguishable from an already reserved or registered corporate name. The provision also applies if the chosen name is already protected by law, rules, and regulations, or if its use is contrary to law, public morals, good customs, or public policy.
Under Section 160, which is the violation of disqualification provision, it penalizes any director, trustee, or officers who continues to serve even if they already know that they are disqualified, for example, due to conflict of interest, fraud, or other legal grounds. And if they willfully conceal or hide their disqualification, they can be fined from 10,000 up to 200,000 pesos and permanently banned from becoming an officer in any corporation. When this violation affects or harms the public, like in cases involving investor deception, the penalty goes up to 400,000 pesos. For example, a company director who was convicted of fraud but still sits in the board and hides that fact can be fined and permanently banned. Next is the Section 161, which talk about the violation of duty to maintain records to allow their inspection or reproduction. Under this section, it penalizes any corporations or officers who fail or refuse to keep or show their corporate records. This includes duties stated under Section 45, which is adoption of bylaws, Section 73, books to be kept, Section 92, list of members and proxies, Section 128, which is records in lieu of meetings, and lastly is the Section 177, which is the reportorial requirements. These records ensure transparency and accountability within the corporation. The penalty ranges from 10,000 to 200,000 pesos, and if the violation harms the public, from 20,000 to 400,000 pesos. The Security and Exchange Commission may also use its contempt power under Section 157 to enforce compliance. For example, if a shareholder requests to inspect the company's records and the management refuses without a valid reason, they can be penalized under this section. Lastly is the Section 162, which talk about the willful certification of incomplete, inaccurate, false, or misleading statements or reports. This section states that any person, including the auditors, who knowingly certifies reports that are inaccurate, incomplete, false, or misleading shall face a fine ranging from 20,000 to 200,000 pesos. However, if this wrongful certification causes harms to the public such as misleading investors or damaging the public trust, the penalty increases to 40,000 up to 400,000 pesos, and the auditor or the responsible person may also be held liable. For example, if a company's financial statements hides the major losses but the auditor still signs and certifies it as accurate, that's considered a violation under Section 162.
Section 163 focuses on the accountability of independent auditors. It states that if an auditor, in collusion with company's directors or officers, certifies financial statements that are false, incomplete, or misleading, they will face serious penalties. The fine ranges from 80,000 to 500,000 pesos. If the fraudulent report harms the public or investors, the fine increases to 100,000 pesos to 600,000 pesos. For example, if an auditor helps a company hide 10 million pesos in losses to make it appear profitable, both the auditor and the company officers can be penalized for fraud and deception. Section 164 penalizes anyone who forms a corporation through fraudulent means. This includes using false documents, fake names, or misleading information during registration. The fine ranges from 200,000 pesos to 2 million pesos, and if the act harm or deceive the public, it can reach to 5 million pesos. For example, if a group registers a fake corporation to attract investors and run off with the money, they feel guilt of corporate fraud and will be faced heavy penalties under this section.
In continuation, Section 165 penalizes corporations that conduct business through fraud or deception. If the company operates dishonestly, like falsifying reports or misleading investors, it faces fines ranging from 200,000 to 2 million pesos. However, if the fraudulent act causes harm to public, fines increases from 400,000 up to 5 million pesos. Let's say, Giocola Company falsify its financial statement to appear profitable and attract more investors. When discovered, the company faces heavy penalties for operating through deception. This section upholds integrity and public trust in all business transactions. Moving on to Section 166, focuses on corporations that act as intermediaries to graft or corruption. If the company is used to commit or conceal corrupt act like bribery or money laundering, it can be fined 100,000 to 5 million pesos. Moreover, if the corporation is lack of safeguard or anti-corruption policy, that alone serves as prima facie evidence of liability. For instance, Ben's company is used by government officials to channel bribe money through fake contract. Since it failed to implement proper anti-corruption policy, the company is presumed liable. This emphasizes that companies must actively prevent corruption through ethics program and internal control. Next, Section 167 penalizes corporation that hires middlemen to commit graft on their behalf. Even if the corporation doesn't directly commit illegal acts, it's still equally liable if its representative engage in corruption for its benefit. Fines ranges from 100,000 to 1 million. For example, Beyola, a construction firm, hires a consultant to smooth things out with local officials to win a government project. The consultant bribes officials, making the company liable under this section. This ensures that corporation cannot escape from their responsibility by using third parties for their illegal acts. Meanwhile, Section 168 addresses corporate leaders like directors, trustees, or officers who knowingly tolerating corruption. If they are aware of fraudulent activities but choose to ignore or cover them up, they can face fines between 500,000 and 1 million pesos. For example, Ms. De La Peña, a company director, discovered Mr. Ceron, a manager, who has been paying kickbacks for contract but does nothing about it. She can be fined for tolerating corruption. This provision promotes ethical leadership and holds those in power accountable for inaction. Lastly, Section 169 focuses on protecting whistleblowers, employees who report corporate wrongdoing. If the company retaliates against them by firing, demoting, or threatening their livelihood, it can face fines from 100,000 to 1 million pesos. In example, Mr. Velasco, an employee, reports his company for bribing inspector. Later, the management fired him in retaliation. This company faces penalties
for punishing the whistleblower. In accordance with this section encourages honesty and accountability within the corporation and protects the individual who stands for what is right.
170. Other violations of the code. Section 170 talks about penalties for violation of the corporation code that are not specifically mentioned elsewhere. It states that anyone found guilty may be fined from 10,000 to 1 million. If the violation is committed by a corporation, the Security and Exchange Commission may, after proper notice and hearing, dissolve the corporation. However, this doesn't mean that the individual responsible, such as directors or officers, will go unpunished. They can still face separate legal actions for their involvement. Liability under this section is independent from any administrative, civil, or criminal liability. For example, if a company repeatedly fails to file its annual reports, even after several warnings, it may be heavily fined or even dissolved for neglecting its legal duties. Section 171, Liability of Directors, Trustees, Officers, or Employees. Section 171 emphasizes personal accountability within corporations. If a corporation commits an offense, the court has the discretion to impose the penalty on the corporation itself and or on the directors, trustees, stockholders, officers, or employees responsible for the violation. This means that those who play a direct or indispensable role in committing the offense cannot hide behind the corporate name to escape liability. For instance, if a company releases false advertisements that mislead the public and the marketing manager knowingly approve them, the manager can also be personally penalized under this section. Section 172, Liability of Aiders and Abettors. Section 172 extends accountability of those who assist or encourage others in violating of the code. Anyone who aids, abets, counsel, commands, induces, or causes a violation can be fined up to the same amount as the main offender, depending on their level of participation. This ensures that not only the main violators but also those who contribute indirectly to corporate wrongdoing are held responsible. It serves as a strong reminder that corporation and illegal acts, even behind the scenes, still carries serious legal consequence. For example, a lawyer who helps a company falsify corporate documents can face the same fine as the company that actually committed the act. Section 173, Outstanding Capital Stock Defined. Section 173 provides a clear definition of outstanding capital stock. It refers to the total number of shares issued under binding subscription contracts, whether fully or partially paid, but excluding treasury shares. In simple terms, these are the shares that are currently owned by stockholders and still active in the market. This concept is important because it determines voting rights, dividend distribution, and other ownership-related matters. For example, if a company issues 10,000 shares but later buys back 2,000 shares, only 8,000 shares are considered outstanding. These are the shares that represent ownership in the company. Section 174, Designation of Governing Boards. Section 174 focuses on the flexibility of non-stock or special corporation. It states that through their articles of incorporations or bylaws, these corporations may call their governing body by another name instead. The Standard Board of Trustees. This allows organizations to choose titles that better reflect their purpose and structure. For instance, educational institution or non-profit organizations may prefer to call their board the Council of Leaders or Board of Governors. This provision highlights the code adaptability to different types of corporations, ensuring that the governance structure remain inclusive, relevant, and suitable to the organization's nature.
Section 175 talks how the Securities and Exchange Commission is allowed to collect payments from corporations like registration fees, penalties, and other charges. What's important here is that the SEC doesn't just collect these funds, it can also use them to support its own operation, as stated in the code. All the money collected goes into a separate account, which serve as a special fund. This fund helps the SEC modernize its systems, improve facilities, and cover its daily operational equipment, increasing employee salaries and benefits, providing healthcare, and conducting training programs. Through these efforts, the SEC becomes more efficient and capable of delivering faster and better services to the public. Example, when companies pay their registration fees for the SEC might use part of that money to improve its online system for quicker processing, hold training sessions for its employees, or even provide healthcare benefits. All of these help the SEC serve the public more effectively and professionally. Section 176 focuses on how the National Economic and Development Authority monitors corporations to make sure they're not misusing the corporate structure or violating the law. Basically, NEDA checks if companies are operating fairly and within legal boundaries. If it finds any misuse or irregularities, it can report these findings to Congress and recommend actions to fix or prevent them. This helps ensure that corporations follow the right rules and maintain fair business practices. Congress has the power to set limits on stock ownership, especially in corporations that serve the public interest. These limits are important because they prevent monopolies or unfair competition, in line with the Philippine Competition Act or Republic Act 10667. When NEDA makes recommendation, it doesn't just decide randomly. It carefully looks at different factors such as the type of industry, the size of the company, how much Filipino ownership it has, where it's located, how many people it employs, and even its exports exponential. Example, if a group-related individuals owns too many shares in a company that provides electricity to the public, NEDA may recommend setting ownership limits. This makes sure that no single family or group controls the whole industry, helping promote fair competition and protecting public interests. Section 177 talks about the reportorial requirements of corporation. It says that all corporations, whether local or foreign, must submit reports every year to the SEC. This includes an audited financial statement and a general information sheet. If a company's assets or liabilities are below 600,000, the report can just be certified by the treasurer instead of an independent auditor. For corporations with public interest, they also need to submit compensation and performance reports for their directors or trustees. All these reports must be filled annually following the SEC's deadlines. If a company fails to submit its reports 3 times within 5 years, it can be marked as delinquent. Corporations may hide confidential details if they provide a separate confidential report explaining why. Example, all corporations must regularly submit reports to the SEC to stay compliant. If they fail to do so 3 times within 5 years, they can be marked as delinquent and may face penalties. This rule ensures that companies remain transparent, accountable, and properly monitored by the SEC. Section 178 gives the SEC the power to inspect and monitor corporations to make sure they follow the law. This includes checking company records, supervising their activities, and enforcing compliance when needed. If a corporation refuses to cooperate or blocks the SEC's inspection without a valid reason, the SEC has the authority to revoke its certificate of incorporation and impose other penalties as provided by the law. All the information and results gathered during these inspections are kept confidential. They can only be revealed if the law requires it, if it's necessary to protect the public, or if the information needs to be presented in court. In short, this section ensures the SEC can properly regulate operations while still protecting their sensitive information. Example, it shows that the SEC has the authority to inspect corporations and ensure they follow the law. If a company refuses to cooperate during an inspection, the SEC can revoke its registration and impose penalties. However, all findings from the inspection are kept confidential unless disclosure is required by law or needed to protect public interest. Section 179 gives the SEC broad authority to supervise and regulate all corporations in the Philippines. It can resolve corporate disputes, impose sanctions, and revoke. registrations when companies violate the law. The SEC also promotes good corporate governance and protects minority investors by issuing rules that ensure fairness and transparency. In performing its duties, the SEC can issue orders, summon witnesses, inspect records, and even dissolve corporations involved in illegal acts. It may also set rules for meetings and voting using technology to adapt to modern business needs. Also, no court below the Court of Appeals can interfere with the SEC's actions, ensuring its independence in enforcing laws and maintaining integrity in the corporate sector. Example, if the SEC finds ABC Corporation committing fraud, it can stop operation, revoke its registration, and penalize the company. This shows the SEC powers to protect the public and maintain corporate integrity.
Okay, let's dive to Section 180, which is the development and implementation of electronic filing and monitoring system. The purpose of this section is to make the practices of Securities and Exchange Commission easier, faster, and more modern. The Securities and Exchange Commission must create an electronic system for tasks such as reserving and registering a corporate name, filing incorporation paper, and submitting reports and documents. Through this system, paperwork will reduce and processing will become faster. It also allows the sharing of information with other agencies, making records more coordinated and accessible. For example, a company uses the Securities and Exchange Commission e-pass system to submit its annual financial online instead of filing it manually at the Securities and Exchange Commission office. Okay, let's talk about the Section 181, which is arbitration for corporation. This refers to the use of arbitration as a method of resolving disputes or conflicts within a corporation. It may be written in the Articles of Incorporation or bylaws that internal disputes must first go through arbitration instead of going directly to court. The disputes covered include those arising from bylaws or articles in a corporation or relationship between the members and officer. However, disputes involving criminal offenses or third parties are non-arbitrable or cannot be settled by arbitration. The agreement must clearly specify, number one, is the number of arbitration and the procedure for their selection. Number two is the arbitration must come from accredited arbitration organization. If an arbitration agreement exists, the court must dismiss the case and refer it to arbitration first. The arbitral tribunal has the authority to decide on its own jurisdiction to issue interim jurisdiction and to issue interim measures to protect the rights of the parties. Lastly, the final arbitral decision becomes effective 15 days after receipt, unless an appeal is filed with a bond or court injunction is issued. For example, if two shareholders disagree on profit distribution because their bylaw contains an arbitration clause, the dispute is resolved through arbitration rather than court litigation. Section 180. Jurisdiction over party-less organization. This law transfers the authority and responsibility over party-less organization from the Securities and Exchange Commission to the COMELEC or Commission on Elections. All monitoring, supervision, and regulation of party-less corporation will automatically transfer to the COMELEC 6 months after the law takes effect. The COMELEC and Securities and Exchange Commission must work together to issue rules for a smooth transition of authority. For example, the Kabataan Party List is no longer registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Instead, it is registered and monitored by COMELEC as part of the electoral process. Section 180. Applicability of the code. It clarifies that the revised corporation code does not amend or replace existing special law for the certain corporations, such as bank, non-bank financial institution, and insurance companies. This special corporation remains under the primary authority of their respective regulator, such as the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the Insurance Commission. For example of this section is BDO Bank is registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, but is mainly regulated by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas under the Special Banking Law. Section 184. Effect of amendment or repeal of the scope or the dissolution of a corporation. Even if a corporation is dissolved or the corporation code is amended or repealed, the rights, liabilities, and obligation of the corporation, its stockholder and members, and its directors, trustees, as officers will not be removed or affected. All existing rights and responsibility before the change remain valid and enforceable. For example, as a corporation owes payment to a supplier before it was dissolved. Even after the dissolution, the debt must still be paid because the liability continues to exist.
Section 185 states that corporations that are already legally operating in the Philippines and are affected by the new requirements of the revised corporation code are given a grace period or transition period. They have no more than 2 years from the date the law became effective to comply with these changes. This gives them enough time to adjust their operations, amend their internal documents, and take any other necessary actions required to comply with the new legal requirements. For example, a corporation in Rizal, Calabarzon, Philippines was established before the revised corporation code took effect. If the new code requires a higher minimum paid-up capital, this corporation has 2 years from the date the RCC became effective to increase its paid-up capital. This avoids immediate penalties or forced closure, providing a reasonable time frame for compliance. Section 186. The separability clause is a standard but crucial provision in many laws. Its purpose is to protect the overall validity of a law, even if a specific part of it is challenged and found to be invalid or unconstitutional by court. This clause ensures that if one part of the revised corporation code is declared invalid or unconstitutional, the rest of the law remains in effect. The validity of the remaining provision is maintained, allowing the law to continue operating even if specific parts are struck down. This prevents the entire law from becoming void due to a single invalid provision. For example, if a section on foreign ownership is declared unconstitutional, the remaining sections of the revised corporation code, such as those dealing with corporate governance, mergers, and dissolution, remain valid and enforceable. This ensures the continued smooth operation and regulation of corporations under the valid portions of the law. Section 187. This section formally repeals Batas Pambansa Bilang 68, also known as the Corporation Code of the Philippines. It states that any other law, presidential decree, issuance, executive order, letter of instruction, administrative order, rule or regulation that is contrary to or inconsistent with any provision of the revised corporation code is also repealed or modified accordingly. This ensures that there is no confusion about which rules are currently in effect. The revised corporation code is the supreme law on corporate matters, and anything that conflicts with it is no longer valid. For example, if the Department of Trade and Industry had a regulation that permitted a specific type of corporate instruction, and the revised corporation code now prohibits that specific corporate structure, the old DTI regulation is no longer valid. The new corporation code takes precedence. Section 188. That section determines the exact date when the revised corporation code officially came into force and became legally binding. It states that the revised corporation code takes effect upon the completion of its publication in either the official gazette or in at least 2 newspapers of general circulation throughout the Philippines. This ensures that the public has been properly notified about the new law. Publication is a critical step in making a law effective because it provides constructive notice to everyone that the law exists and is in force. For example, as a revised corporation code was signed on February 20, 2019 and published in the Manila Bulletin and Business Mirror on February 23, 2019, it took effect on February 23, 2019. From this date forward, all corporations were required to comply with the RCC's provision.
In closing, these three titles of the Corporation Code, Foreign Corporations, Investigations and Penalties, and Miscellaneous Provisions, work together to promote transparency, accountability, and proper governance among all corporations operating in the Philippines. Understanding these sections helps us see how the law maintains order, guides corporate conduct, and protects the public's interest. Thank you. And I hope this discussion has strengthened your understanding of the code.